Hi, I'm Sarah, this is Hardcover Hearts, and I'm back for my week of reading wrap-up where I talk about the books that I read, what I'm currently reading, and then potentially could read next week based on my mood. I had a good reading week, not as many physical books as audiobooks, but some weeks that's the way it goes. So let me jump right in and kind of share what I've been reading. The first is a continuation of a series that I've really grown to love. I wasn't sure about it when I first started, and this is the Commissario Brunetti series by Donna Leon. The one that I'm talking about is number 10, A Sea of Troubles. And in this series, what really I love the most about it is Donna Leon she actually lives in Venice, and she tells stories about Venetian life, Venetian society, through the lens of this police detective and the police procedural. And we end up knowing a lot about him, about his family, which is really lovely. He's got an amazing wife, and the connections in Venice, which ends up feeling like a little bit of a small town that ends up being on this kind of global stage. So in this one, we get kind of a leap forward in the relationship between Brunetti and someone that he works with. So there's this magnificent woman. Her name is Elettra, and Elettra is she's de facto secretary for his boss, the main guy at the police station, but she's so much more, and she's so underutilized. Most people don't realize what she's like. Most people don't understand all of the ways that she is sneakily helpful in ways that they would never have gotten to the conclusion had they not paid attention. But Brunetti sees, and they've developed a relationship where she can kind of support and help him along the way. This ends up being quite interesting, and they form a mutual respect, and you can see her wanting to do more because she knows she's capable of it. And it all comes to bear in this one situation because there is a death of some fishermen off this island in Lido. And so it's technically a little bit out of their jurisdiction, but they get the call, they start to try to investigate it. But this area is very tight-knit. It's very quiet. They don't let outsiders in. They are not going to talk to the police. And so because of that, Elettra has a unique opportunity to go in because she has family there. She has people, and she is known in that community. And so she makes a pitch and really pushes hard to get herself involved in the case. And it really upsets Brunetti and kind of throws him off balance to have her there because she, in essence, as skilled as she is, she's not really a detective. She's not trained as a policewoman. And this also is something that his wife, Paola, who's incredibly perceptive, very, very smart. She is a professor of literature at the university, and she can see what's happening. Is it a romance? Is the types of things that he cares about within the normal bounds, or is it something more? I loved the exploration of that, and will continue in this series. I think it's great. So it's almost like, for me, the Brunetti storyline always comes first, and then the mysteries are a secondary, and that's why I read. It's almost like Brunetti, Venice, Venetian life, and then the mystery. So that was number 10. I'll be continuing on. Then I read a new author to me. I've heard this author mentioned many times. This is Joël Dicker. He is a French writer, and he writes mysteries and thrillers and suspenseful books. This is his latest, Enigma in Room 622. And this was translated by Robert Bonnono. What to say about this? I did this on audio, as I mentioned, and although it's a very long book, it's really a long, thick book, I found that I enjoyed it in audio. It was an interesting story pretty well told. I mean, it went in a few kind of wacky areas and kind of zany areas, but I didn't know what to expect, so I think that made my experience so much better. My understanding from reading a lot of the Goodreads reviews is people who have read a lot of his books have been disappointed in this one. They felt that it was maybe a rehash and or not up to the standards that they expect from him. So that's very interesting because it gives me a nice backlog to try to investigate if I want to dive in. So what it's about is we have this writer who it seems like he just went through a breakup, is having difficulty getting his novel finished. And so he goes for a retreat, as one does apparently, to a luxury Swiss hotel. And while he's at the hotel, he meets this lovely young woman who finds out that he's an author. And they both discover that on their floor, there's a room that isn't marked correctly. And so room 622 the numbering seems to skip. And they can't really understand why. Well, this young woman becomes obsessed. She's like, oh, well, you're a mystery writer. And it's kind of meta because the narrator is Joël and he's, trying to go through his book. And so it's very, he is placing himself in this as a character. And this woman becomes obsessed and wants to be his kind of de facto assistant in solving this mystery. And so she's really kind of pushing all the connections. So that's kind of one storyline, the present day storyline. And then we go back and we start to see in the previous days what actually happened in this room. And there's a love triangle. It takes place in the Swiss banking world where there is the kind of a challenge for who is going to be dominant in this particular bank. Very, very, very expensive, chic, luxury bank, and it has been owned in the family for generations. But that doesn't mean it's naturally going to fall into the hands of the one who was born into this family. So it's between really the familial inheritor that was kind of expected based on how this bank has always run, and a young upstart who came from nothing and who's really skilled and really good and puts in all the work and all the effort. And then they have a tension because they are both in love with the same woman, and that woman actually married into the family bank. She married the one who could potentially take over. So that was incredibly interesting. I loved that part of the story, but it did get a little weird. There was like a twist that was a little funny, but it all of a sudden it kind of veered it into a little zanier and a little more silly than I was expecting. And it just kind of stretched credulity in a way that I didn't expect. It was so, up to that point, it was, a fairly innocuous, normal type of mystery. So, enjoyed it. I'm glad I did it on audio because then I didn't see how much I had left to do. I could just enjoy the story. I think the audio was very good. I've also heard that although this is his most recent and most hyped, it's not his best, as I mentioned, but I've also heard that the translation is clunky. So that makes me curious. People who are used to reading his work were a little disappointed in that. So interesting. I considered it a good book for my first time reading Dicker, but I'm curious if there's something better out there. If you've read any of his, please let me know which ones you would recommend below, please. Then let's talk about another of these moments where I read two books that seem to talk to each other. The first one, right off of Enigma of room 622, I was able to get Big Swiss. Big Swiss is by Jen Beagin, and this is kind of everywhere right now. And this is wild. This is a funny, wild story, kind of in the lines of like Nell Zink, Otesha Mosfig, a little bit of Broder, like that kind of feminist, irreverent, boundaryless, kind of wild ride type of thing with humor interspersed. This was really funny. It was really funny. So the story is you've got an older woman who is kind of lawless. She is living with a friend. They're living in this kind of dilapidated home. Her life has kind of unspooled itself, and she's just surviving day to day. She has a job. Her job is that she transcribes the therapy, I'm laughing because it was so funny, the therapy sessions from this therapist who's kind of outrageous. He calls himself and he's very, considers himself like a spiritual dude, and he just does all the wrong things and says all the wrong things at the wrong times. And, he's so that the observations of listening to her transcribing these sessions is quite funny. And she becomes kind of interested in this one woman's story. She ends up calling her Big Swiss because she's from Switzerland, even though keeps saying Sweden, which is not, she's not from Sweden, but he can't get it out of his mind, and he says it all the time. So, he's made to be a ridiculous character, and it works very, very well with the narrative. Big Swiss has really gone through something traumatic, and our main character, Greta, really wants to know and gets kind of sucked into that storyline and what happened to her in ways that she should not. She's only supposed to be transcribing, and actually has said that he does automated transcription service. He doesn't use people. So this is in an upstate New York, and it's a small area, so people know each other. And sure enough, she runs into very innocuously, very innocently runs into Big Swiss, and there are sparks. There's immediate romantic attraction, but of course she knows all sorts of things, but gets kind of pulled into something that has hilariously disastrous, hilarious effects. I really love an unhinged older woman who also is really lusty. This woman is such, and there's a lot of sex in this book, so I'll just say that straight out. It's funny, it's amusing. I found it thoroughly entertaining. It was so much fun. I found so that was great. And then I picked up a book that I'm late to this. This has been a lot of other places. This is Vladimir by Julia May Jonas. This was an ARC that I found in a little free library. Also, unhinged older woman, but in a different way. So whereas Big Swiss, her life had kind of fallen apart, and she was roommates with somebody in this dilapidated home and just kind of hanging on. This woman is well established in her career. She is a professor at a university. Her husband has also been working at this university, and they have, in essence, had an openish relationship, an open marriage, in that he could do what he wanted and she was going to do what she wanted. And that worked for both of them. Until Me Too. Until all of a sudden, he is confronted with the fact that it's not just that they have an open marriage, which no one knows, only they know that, but that his choices of relationships are with students and young women. And that power dynamic is called into question, and he's kind of taken to carpet, is that the phrase? He's held accountable for some of those indiscretions. Now, there's an interesting question about power and the attractive component of power, and consent. So these women were all of age; they were all of consenting age. But what is the power dynamic? Most of them were not in his class, or it was after. And so those are interesting things to weigh out. So while that's happening to him, she gets pulled into the maelstrom of that because people are saying that they think that she's complicit in some way, and she's not at all complicit, but she doesn't necessarily feel that she should have to tell anyone that she also had her own affairs in her own life, and that he was free to do his. And so what's interesting to me was that tension there, that tension of her culpability and her responsibility. Was she responsible? For what? Why? How? Really interesting stuff, right? So we have that as kind of the main tension, and that goes for like the first 2/3. And then there's like this radical shift that happens in like the last third of the book, that I was all along for the ride. I stayed with it, but I didn't necessarily buy it. And for me, if I don't believe in the backing rationale for a character to take certain actions, I think it does make me judge the book's effectiveness. And for me, I did not feel that I understood why she went to the furthest extremes that she did. And so you're wondering the name, Vladimir. So it all comes to play because there's a young professor and his wife that show up, and he's very flirty and he's very handsome, and she might want to outrun and kind of step away from some of the problems that her husband's having, and that she's getting pulled in by starting something up with this younger. It's not that he's significantly young, but there's a nice gap between in their lives. And so she starts to fixate on this younger man, younger associate professor. So a lot about power, consent, consequences, all of that good stuff. Overall, I liked it, but I didn't. It could have been much, much stronger for me. So there you go. But I'm all here for the 50+ lusty ladies. Okay, let's switch the topics, because this one was not at all light and fun. This was incredibly impactful. Yesterday, I'm not even sure how successful it was. I didn't watch the news because I was so grossed out. But it was supposed to be the fascists stepping out into the world and proposing a day of hate. And I've been so upset with all of the anti-Semitism. I've been very, very upset with the rise of fascism. And I've tried to read a couple books to get myself in solidarity, but each one is so terrifying that I have to step away. But this one was phenomenal. And just the right level of information and the right tone and I was lucky that it was very short. This is Address Unknown by Katherine Kressmann Taylor. Now this is a reissue. This is in essence, a short story. Y'all, I guess I'm doing short stories this year. Who knew this was going to be me? And this was originally published in 1938 in Story magazine. And it is incredibly powerful. This is a novel, but it's written in epistolary form. So it's letters between a man named Max, who lives in San Francisco, and his business partner, Martin. And Martin has moved his family from San Francisco back to Germany, to Munich. And their correspondence shows the sadness of the departure, but the excitement that each other have for the new chapters and what's on the horizon. But we see very, very quickly that Martin succumbs to the forces of Hitler and Nazism. And at first it's not very clear is he writing, what is he saying because of censorship, or what is he saying because that's in his heart? And he has adopted these right-wing fascist beliefs. And it just felt so similar to things that we're going through in the United States in the past few years, where people all of a sudden become QAnon and spew things that are just don't make any sense. Or there are, MAGA people that are good in their heart, but all of a sudden get caught up in this furor around MAGA. And watching this unfold, and there's a pivotal moment where something happens, where there's a choice to be made, and the impact of that choice has tremendous impact on those remaining in ways that I found both horrible and also quite satisfying in a specific way. I won't say more because I think people should read this. It was phenomenal. And like I said, super tiny. It's a short story. So in this little form, I think it was only 66 pages. I highly recommend it. Okay, so let me talk about what I'm currently reading. Dee Dee from Brown Girl Reading, you were right. I have made the decision. I was to change my tactics for the Rougon-Macquart series. The Rougon-Macquart series by Émile Zola's 20 novels, and they were published in a certain order, but he recommended them to be read in a different order. So I was trying to, follow in his spirit, but very quickly I recognized I don't have the backstory enough on the socio-political nature of this time in Paris, which is Belle Epoque time, Second Empire. So I don't have enough context to be able to make those kinds of leaps like he was asking for. So Dee Dee was like, I don't know if that's such a good idea. So I am I'm taking your wisdom, and I am, even though I only read a couple chapters in His Excellency Eugene Rougon, which was phenomenal, by the way, but I was discomforted by the jump in time. So I'm putting this down. I will return, and I'm going to The Kill. So this is the second. And this really moves us into Paris, moves all of the action to Paris. And this is during the Haussmann change. Baron Haussmann really transformed the city. He's the one who put the big boulevards and the grid model and changed Paris, but there's a ton of displacement. There's a ton of challenges to doing something like this when people live in homes and people will be displaced by these types of things. So interested in reading this. I already started it. I'm only about a chapter and a half in, but again, still loving Zola's writing. Then I can't talk about this yet, but I will be talking about this tomorrow. I just finished this. This is Transit of Venus by Shirley Hazzard. I'm sure many of you know I am starting a project. It's already in full swing, so I can't accept any new people coming in, but we're reading with a bunch of people. We're reading an author's work. And so the author is Shirley Hazzard. So we started with this one. We just finished it today, so we're all talking about it. So I will review it next week. And then I finished this morning, but I need time to think about it. This is If an Egyptian Cannot Speak by Noor Naga. So expect conversation about this next week, about those two specifically. Then I'm very slowly, as Susan suggested, I am going to be reading Paris Stories by Mavis Gallant. I already read the first one. It was very good. A little sparse, a little philosophical, but it didn't have the things that I don't like. I don't like weird, creepy, strange. I like things that are focused in reality and have a little bit of lushness. It was lacking a little bit of the texture and a little bit of the beauty, but I'm going to keep going. So I'm doing this. And then another short story collection, or at least integrated stories or interwoven stories. Told you, who knew this was going to happen to me? This is something that I've had as a digital arc that all of a sudden just piqued my interest. This is Filthy Animals by Brandon Taylor. I am a big fan of Brandon Taylor's Substack, and I think he is incredibly smart and thinks deeply about literature, about criticism, about craft, and reading his essays about craft has always provided me something to ponder and deeply think about. So I was a bit worried, even though I've read his first one, Real Life, that maybe this was going to be very dense, but so far not at all. It's very accessible, very accessible. So I'll continue on with that. And then I started an audiobook, and this is My Father's House by Joseph Campbell. I can't see because it's an audiobook and it's in my phone. And I'm filming with my phone. So I'll put the link to it below. But this was one of the Walter Scott Prize long list. And I really like that prize. So when this came up in my hold for the library, I jumped on it. And so far, the audiobook is exceptional. It's set in Vatican City during World War II. And we have one of the priests is a spy helping the resistance. So it sounds very good, and he writes very compelling, very interesting writing. I think he's won the Walter Scott Prize before, so it's off to an auspicious start. So that's it. That's all. I hope that your reading was really great this week. If you've read any of the below books that I've mentioned, I would love to know your thoughts. And if you've read anything that's similar, please let me know. That's it for now. Thank you so much for watching, and we'll talk to you soon. Bye.